This is my cat. She hangs out by my desk every day, usually sleeping on this old blanket and cardboard box. Elegoo reached out and asked if I wanted to make something for their Prints for Pets campaign, so I figured, what better excuse to finally build her something better? So I got to work. Welcome to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Dave, and I build creative solutions to everyday problems and some things that nobody asked for. I've made a few videos for my husky before. I'll leave the links below if you're interested. But when Elegoo reached out to me and asked if I wanted to participate in their Prints for Pets event, I knew exactly what I needed to do next. My cat is always curled up beside my desk on that sad little blanket, so I figured this was a great chance to give her an upgrade. I had an idea to make a stylized sleigh bed, something you'd see in a cartoon or a fairy tale. So I started the project the way I always do, and I turned to AI to generate some ideas. I started with Midjourney, but it took the sleigh bed idea way too literally. Then my wife sent me an image she generated in ChatGPT, and that became the blueprint. It had the right look and could easily be broken down into printable parts. I just needed to add a little bit more bling, so I uploaded the image to ChatGPT and asked it to create some fancy details, and it came up with this, which was perfect. It changed the rounded crossbars on the headboard and footboard, but that I could work around that. It wasn't a big deal. So then I asked it to create a profile image of the bed so I could start working. From here I moved into Fusion 360. I'm using the Elegoo Centauri Carbon to print the bed, so I built a construction script of 256 by 256 as a guide for the build area. I recorded the whole design process, but don't want to bore people that don't really care and just want to get to the end product, so I'm just going to go over the highlights. But if you want to see how I created the bed, stick around after the final reveal, and I'll walk through the whole process explaining my decisions along the way. So I started by importing the profile image of the bed into Fusion, and then lined it up so the headboard leg maximized the print bed area. Once I had it lined up as I liked it, I created a sketch and started tracing the leg. Then I traced out the side rail and then the footboard. I wanted the footboard to be a little shorter than the headboard, even though the images are the same size. So I started by tracing the top curve shape and then lowered it down to where I liked it. And then I used my calibrated eyeball to build out the rest of the leg. The sketches were then extruded to build out the mesh, and then this same process was done on all the other parts until I ended up with the final bed. I know the process I just described is very similar to this meme, but if you're curious how I went from sketch to model, remember to stick around at the end for the full breakdown. And if you're into Fusion and design processes like this, consider subscribing, as it's a great way to catch more of my deep dives. I figured since I was using the Centauri Carbon, I would try out Elegoo's Slicer also. I wanted to verify that the objects would actually fit on the build plate before I spent a bunch of time creating all the connecting joints. First was the headboard leg to see if it fit, and
like a glove.
I did find that the head and footboard rails didn't fit, so I had to make a quick edit to them. So with everything verified, I went back to Fusion and added some tabs and pins for alignment during gluing, and then exported everything back to the slicer. So with everything laid out and ready to go, but before I YOLO'd the print, I took all the connection areas and trimmed them down as small as possible so I could print test pieces to make sure everything fit together, so I didn't end up wasting a lot of filament. And it was a good thing I did these test prints because I found one of the pegs on the footboard leg was a little bit too long to fit into the side rail, and it ended up being that I made a typo in Fusion and the hole was 2 millimeters too short. It was a quick adjustment and then it was ready to print. The bed was printed in Elegoo's brown PLA, and all the gold details were using Elegoo's silk gold PLA. And after about 24 hours of printing and about 1.3 kilograms of filament used, all the parts were ready to be assembled. First, I add all the gold elements onto the different bed pieces, starting with the legs. There's 3 pins that align the detail onto the leg, while I use CA glue to glue it into place. The gold detail at the base of the leg just slides into the groove that's made for it. The top rails get glued together with the gold detail that hides the joint sandwiched in the middle. I'm brushing on the CA glue activator instead of spraying it because the bottle's almost empty, and sometimes this discolors the plastic, so I didn't want to get a lot of overspray. For the details on the headboard and footboard, these were just eyeballed into place. I lined them up first where I wanted them and then glued them in. For the bed assembly, the rails get glued to the legs, then the footboard and headboards get glued to the first set of legs, and then the second set gets glued on top. Now the bed frame was done, but it still needs a mattress to be a bed. First I cut a piece of 1/4-inch plywood to act as the base for the mattress. I had this piece of dense packing foam that was perfect for the mattress. Now I just needed to wrap it in fabric, but I also wanted to make it removable so it could be washed. The process of sewing the cover is pretty simple, although it did take a few tries. First step was cutting the fabric down to size. Then I hemmed one end, which was pretty straightforward. Now for the first mistake. I wanted the seam to be at the bottom edge, which is why I'm folding it up this way. The mistake came when I was having difficulty clipping the fabric in place and thought I could just draw a line and use that as a guide to sew it. After sewing both sides, the error was clear. The bottom needed to be sewn higher up, so it was time to remove the stitches and try again. This time I pinned the seam and it worked out properly. Now the same needed to be done on the other end, and this is where mistake number 2 became visible. If this was a pillow, this would have worked out fine, but because it's rigid foam and was very thin, there was no way to remove the foam with the seam in the middle of the mattress. So the seam needed to be moved to the end, so the one side just needed to be flipped over the corners, but to do that, the stitches all needed to be removed again. But third time was the charm. For the final assembly, I printed the bottom board black, and the cushion fit snugly into place. All that was left to do is to see if my cat would actually like it or go back to the cardboard box. I was ready for her to completely ignore the bed, but the second I put it down, she ran right over and jumped in. And now she uses it every day right next to me, but a lot more cozy. I'd like to thank Elegoo for asking me to be part of their Prints for Pets event. It really gave me the reason to finally upgrade my cat's bed, and I'm really happy how it turned out. And also, I'd like to thank you if you made it this far. You're awesome. So let me know what you thought of this build. If you liked it, if you thought I could have done anything different, drop a comment below. Start it with the word bed, so I know you got this far. As for the Centauri Carbon, it really is as impressive as everything I've seen online. This was my first time using it, and it literally was plug and play. I printed the benchy that came on the machine for the first print, and after that, it was just right into printing the bed. Same for the Elegoo slicer. Everything just worked as it was supposed to. If you want to see more builds like this, from silly to functional, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I have some more interesting stuff coming down the line. And if you want the STL files to print your own bed for your pet, head over to my Patreon. I'll have them up there. I've also finally set up a Discord server for my Patreon members, so if you want to hang out, talk design, share ideas, maybe suggest other projects for the channel, head over there and come join me. And now for anyone that's interested, let's take a deeper dive to look at how I designed this bed. This build is a pretty good example of how I freestyle a lot of my projects, where I start with a rough design and then just kind of work out the details as I go. Okay, let's get started. Thanks for everybody for sticking around, and we'll pick it up from the beginning or bringing in the image and resizing it to the build area. Once I have it placed, I'm creating a sketch, and I'm using the spline tool to start tracing it. I find Fusion's spline tool does a real good job creating curves as long as you put enough points along the transitions, and if you get to a hard corner, it's a lot easier just to stop the sketch and then start a new one instead of trying to manipulate the handles. To get a 90 degree at the end here, I just run the last spline long and then cut it off at the end. To build the rail, I'm just using the box tool and I'm anchoring it off one of the points from the leg. To make sure the bottom point lined up with the bottom of the leg, I just hovered my mouse over top of that bottom point until it snapped to it, and then typed in the length I wanted to get the proper size. The other leg is the same process, but this one I'm doing in two parts because I wanted to make it shorter. So first I'm tracing out the top, and then once I have that selected, I stop the sketch, and I select all the points and just drag it down to where I want to line up. Now with it in place, I just start drawing points to try to blend it back to match up with the rail. I didn't worry too much about how it was laying out. I was just trying to hit major landmarks like the legs and the rail, and then once it was done, I'll go back and kind of adjust it to get it to look the way I want. Then to finish off the sketch, I went back and added another box over the lip on the rail. Now with these three elements created, I started extruding them. I'm extruding them to 35 millimeters. I just picked something that I thought would look good. There's no real reason for that. And each sketch I'm extruding to its own mesh. The bed rail has some sharp angles, so I'm adding some fillets to smooth them out so it'll print a little easier, and also to blend into the legs. I also added small fillets to both sides of the legs just to smooth out the corners a little bit so it's not such a harsh angle. To create the gold details on the legs, I followed the same approach. I traced it with the spline tool, then extruded it, and then gave it a small fillet just around the edges. To create this bottom detail, I started by sketching out just a box that was approximately the same size. Then I rounded the corners in the sketch and then extruded it to give me the starting shape. To wrap it around the leg, I then selected just the portion that was extending past the leg and extruded that across and had it stick out just a little bit on the other side. And to finish off the shape, I created a new sketch on the other side of the leg and projected the lines from the other side across. Now that I had this C-shaped mesh, I took the inside faces on all three sides and extended them inwards 1 or 2 millimeters just so it would penetrate the leg. Then I used the detail mesh as a cutting tool to cut out the groove in the leg that this would fit into. Then to ensure that it would slide on easily and not bind up, I selected the 3 faces on the leg and extruded them in 0.01 millimeters on each side. That should give a 0.2 total, which should be enough clearance. Then to finish the detail off, I just added fillets to all the corners to round it off. With one side complete, now I just mirrored everything onto the other side. I know I wanted the bed to be 300 millimeters wide, so I just created a construction plane off the inside of one leg, 150 millimeters, to use that as the mirroring plane. At this point, the proportions didn't quite look right, so I wanted to stretch the bed out a bit. So I just deleted the middle rail, moved the bottom leg over, and reconstructed the rail again. Because Fusion keeps all of your history in the bottom timeline, I was able just to go back to the original sketch and make this edit, and when I completed it, it automatically updated all the processes I had done up to this point. Next, I wanted to figure out the placement for the mattress, so I created a construction plane to bring it up just above the bottom details, and then I used that to draw out the interior and line it up exactly where I wanted the board to sit. To build the top rails of the bed, I used the offset tool to create a shape based off of the curve of the top of the bed, and then I just drew a line across the bottom to cut it flat, because originally my intent was to print this laying flat. Then to build out the headboard, I just drew a box starting from the bottom of the plywood base up until the top rail. And for the thickness, I was just kind of eyeballing it inside of the leg. To create the inset details, I just found the center point with a construction line and then just drew out a center pointed square, kind of eyeballing how I want it to look. After creating the main square, I used the offset tool to create a smaller one inside. That way I could indent these at different heights to create the stair-step effect. Now that I had all the main elements built, I exported them to bring them into the slicer to verify that they'd actually fit on the bed, and this is where I found the problem with the top rails being too big. Before tackling that though, I decided I'd finish off the details on the headboard and the footboard. So for this, I brought in the same image I used at the very beginning and just rotated it and positioned the detail until I kind of got it where I liked it, and then I traced it the same as I did before. Once I had the image traced, I just mirrored it across the center line. To create the same details on the footboard, I just copied the two images from the headboard and duplicated them, and then scaled them down until they fit. So to fix the issue with the rails, the first step was to cut them in half so that way they would fit on the build plate. And then to create the gold detail that would hide the seam between the two parts, I used the same process as I used to build the rail in the beginning, where I selected the outer shape and used the offset tool to make a larger shape that would be the part of the detail that you see, and then I used the same offset to extrude inwards to create the portion of the detail mesh that would be sandwiched between the two rails that would lock it into place. Once I had the detail finished, I used it as a cut tool to cut out the grooves in the rails the same way I cut out the grooves in the legs for the bottom detail. And then once that was done, I offset the faces by 0.01 millimeters to give the needed clearance. Now, to make assembly easy and make sure everything would line up properly, I went through and added pins to all the mating surfaces so that way they would easily lock together and stay aligned. There wasn't really anything special to this. I basically, for each spot, found the center point and made a rectangle and then extruded it. I just eyeballed something that looked like an appropriate size, and then for the hole, I made it 0.1 bigger, so it would have a little bit of clearance. Also, all the corners on the pin, I added a chamfer to, so there would be a little bit of clearance on all the corners and be easier to insert. And then same with the hole, I made it 2 millimeters deeper than the pin, just to make sure it wouldn't bottom out, so the actual surface of the two parts being glued together would be what would push up against and the pin wouldn't interfere. For the details on the legs, I couldn't add a pin on either side of either the leg or the detail because those surfaces need to print flat on the bed. So for these, I create a hole on both sides, both in the leg and on the detail, and then printed out little pins that would print separately and go in between the two faces. Then the last step was I needed to add little cleats for the plywood board to sit on. So I just added one on each rail and one at the end on each leg. And that's it. That's how I took the bed from concept to final print. A lot of it you saw I kind of made up as I went. And if I took more time ahead of time to plan out everything, I could have done it in a little cleaner and more efficient way. But I already had a pretty good concept in my head of what I wanted this to look like. So it was just easier to kind of fill in the details as I went. So thanks for sticking around. And if you want to see another similar video that I go through a design process, you can check out this one here. Or if you want to see another pet-inspired print where I try to build some dog toys for my husky, you can check out this one over here. Thanks for watching.